This man I met online called himself Tanner. We met through a social friendship app where you can write a note about yourself and send a note for others to reply if they like your photo. Tanner replied to my note, which read 56 years old, single female from Virginia, let's get acquainted. I also had my profile marked as seeking friends. I wasn't necessarily wanting to date online, but if I found a friend and it turned into something special, that'd be great too. Tanner replied by sending his profile to me with a reply that said, "Hello, beautiful. Let's chat. Do you have WhatsApp?" Now, the site limits you to 150 characters per note. It's like sending virtual post it notes back and forth, and I've had a few people that I met on the site as friends join on WhatsApp, so we exchange numbers, which it would make it easier for us to have long conversations. Tanner's profile said he was from Miami, Florida. His phone number was a Florida number, and we started talking on WhatsApp. He sent me several pictures of himself, which I've included in my email to you. He said he was 61 years old and originally from Belarus, but left there at 38 years old to come to the USA for a better life and to work for an engineering company as they offered him work. He said he graduated from the top school for engineers in Belarus. I knew nothing about that country, and in fact, I looked it up online when he said it because I didn't want to seem ignorant. I didn't know where it was. I thought it was a country in South America. He told me his mother was from Spain and his father from Belarus, and that his mother passed when he was 8 years old. So his father took him back home to Belarus, and then his father became sick and died when he was 20. And his uncle paid for him to go to college to escape life there and get an education, which would lead to where he is now. He said he was married at 40 and his wife had his daughter 2 years later, but then his wife died from kidney cancer at the age of 39 and left him to raise his daughter alone. He and I spoke about our lives. I was a widow. My husband died 4 years ago from complications of cancer, which we think he developed due to his work. I was his caregiver until the day he died. He was my rock, my life, and my priority, and it was hard to go on without him. But I did find a way, and with the Lord, I grew and became stronger. I'm a very deep religious believer and believe in the Holy Father. Tanner said that he too is very religious and recited some Bible verses and said he attended church every Sunday no matter what. I think what first attracted me to him was his deep love and the faith of our Father. Not many men carry a strong conviction to go to church and are faithful in their religious services, but Tanner said he does, and he showed me a photo of his Bible with a cover that he always has with him and reads it whenever he needs strength, and I could appreciate that in him. Our daily messages started with Bible quotes and prayers, and he was very knowledgeable with the Bible and always wanted to talk about it. Every Sunday he went to church, as did I. So we would discuss our thoughts on our different pastors' sermons and what topics were being brought up in our churches. Tanner told me that he was expected to travel to Colombia for work. His company had a new building project, and he was expected to be there to oversee a lot of the electrical work. He told me he would be there for 7 months and then sent back to the States. He told me he was nervous about working in Colombia as he had heard it was a dangerous country and he'd be working within the city of Bogota. I told him God's angels would protect him and we could stay in touch while he was working. Tanner asked if after his project was over we could meet, and I told him if it's in 7 months, maybe he could join me for our annual Christian music festival that I go with my church group every year. It's music, food, and other Christian groups meet together for prayer. I've gone every year for decades, and I used to go with my husband before he got sick and passed away. It's a great way to meet people. And Tanner told me he'd love to try it out and go, and he'll try to make it home for the celebrations. He did leave for Colombia and messaged me regularly through his journey. He even sent me photos of the work he was doing and what it was all about. I've included the photos. He was very detailed, but he did tell me that every single night he read his Bible for inspiration and strength. Because there's no time difference between Colombia and where I live, we could talk on our regular schedule. Tanner sent me video of where he was working, as well as we started to have phone calls. He had an interesting accent, and I've never spoken to someone from Belarus, so I really didn't know any better. We would talk about things all the time: his work, our thoughts, and of course, we prayed on the phone together and talked about our meeting. He said he was having trouble with some of the workers in Bogota, and he was struggling but trying to make it through so he could get back to the States for us to meet. Tanner did ask me if I could buy him a $100 Apple gift card. He said his phone service was poor and the Apple card would boost his reception. I did buy him the card and told him that I couldn't wait for him to be back in the States. We started talking more frequently. He said he was unable to find a church to go to where he was at, so we started watching a church service together on Sundays online. He said during his time working for this company, they had him in Nigeria for 2 years and he learned of a pastor there that he really enjoyed. So we would stream and watch this pastor on Sunday, and Tanner said we could watch during our normal hours that I was normally at my church service to make it even more of a dedication. As I did this with him for a few weeks, my own pastor called to inquire if I was okay, as I was not attending church. I let my pastor know that yes, I was, but I was helping a special friend watch church service together as he was working out of the country and unable to attend his own church. But I did tell the pastor that next Sunday I would attend. Tanner and I continued our regular conversations, and he told me that he was having trouble getting some cable wire delivered for the project that he was working on, and there was an issue with the import tax, which was causing him grief. He said his boss at the company told him that it was his responsibility to pay the taxes. He is the manager of the project, and his boss will reimburse him when he returns to the States. Tanner said the tax was $2,900, which was high due to the import and country foreigner tax. Tanner asked me again for a $100 Apple gift card as he was trying to keep his phone at good connections. I suggested that maybe he get a phone locally, but he said he didn't plan on being there long enough to do so, as most phone plans ask for a 1 year commitment in Colombia, and by now he was supposed to be finished with his contract in 5 months. I did buy him another gift card, and he said he needed to call his bank to take out a loan for the tax on the shipment, $2,900. Tanner called me later that day very frustrated. He asked me to pray for him, and we did a prayer via phone. He said that his bank cannot loan him the money without him coming into the bank to sign the loan documents and bring proof of identification and collateral. Since he's unable to do that, he called his boss, and his boss scolded him and told him he is the project manager. Get the money somehow. Tanner started to softly cry to me on the phone, praying out to God to help him with his troubles, and it broke my heart. He is a God loving, honest Christian man needing help. He said he was ashamed to ask, but wondered if I'd be willing to loan him the money until he returned to visit me. Now, $2,900 is no small amount, and Tanner continued to pray on the phone to me for an angel to guide and help him. I told Tanner I would think on this for the night, and we bid each other good night. The next morning, Tanner messaged me asking if his angel was awake. I told Tanner I would be willing to loan him the money so he can get his shipment paid, and he thanked me and told me that I would have to pay the tax to the local government official via bank transfer. He gave me the name of a woman in Bogota who handles the tax and shipments for the port. I went ahead and sent the bank transfer, which I let him know also cost me an additional $60 as my bank is a smaller bank and there was a transfer fee, an international transfer and member fee was sending that money. Tanner said he would pay me back double, and I told him no, just the $2,900 and the $60 fee. He asked me to pray for his safe return. As for the delivery of the goods, he said his boss was able to see everything got paid. He sent me a picture of these wires, which he said he received a few days later, and thanked me for being his angel. We kept talking, and we discussed being exclusive and about meeting. I told him I needed to know if he would be here in time for the music festival, as I would need to buy his ticket early before it sells out, and he asked me how much the ticket was. I told him if I buy him the weekend package, it's $150 plus the processing ticket fee and parking, but we could meet and take the same car together to save on parking. Tanner said he would be there in time to get his ticket. He then asked if I was going out as he needed a favor. He said he was in need of a gift card for one of his workers, that his worker's wife had fallen ill, and he asked about a Boost mobile card to add to the worker's phone as the worker was unable to call his wife, who was in the hospital, and he's been so worried as the worker had spent all his money on his wife's cancer treatments. Tanner said he would buy him a card himself, but his bank was having issues with him being overseas and his card was not allowing transactions to go through. He needed a Boost Mobile Reboost $60 card. I had no idea what these were, and Tanner sent me a picture. So I told him, of course, I'll do that, especially for a worker whose wife is sick. I asked the worker's name and the wife's name, and he told me his worker's name was Emmanuel and his wife was named Lois. I added them to my church prayer list. I did get the card, but they're not easy to find. They are with the mobile phones in places like Walmart, not with regular gift cards. I sent him pictures of the card and he thanked me so much and told me his worker was able to check on his wife. And I let him know I bought the tickets to the festival so we can be together. He said he was excited and hoped to finish his work in time. He said it shouldn't be a problem. It was a few days later when Tanner told me there was an accident at the work site. The co-worker who had been with the sick wife and needed the boost card, he fell from a large ladder while trying to send cable wires on the job and was rushed to the emergency room. Tanner told me that the government did an inspection of the site and his company did not have the correct permit prior to this particular job, as they were going to hold Tanner responsible for the accident. The cost of medical care, and a fine for negligence for not having the appropriate permits. He said he called his boss, who refused to pay the fee, and told Tanner he's in charge and it was his responsibility. But Tanner said he didn't know about all this and the worker is in critical condition needing surgery, and on top of all that, the man's wife has taken a turn for the worse with her cancer treatments. Tanner was crying on the phone with me, begging me to pray for him as he goes to meet with government officials to find out how much he has to pay in total. He said he doesn't know what to do and they'll throw him in jail if he doesn't pay. I told him leave it to God and I'll pray for him. He said the next day he would go to the government office and find everything out. The next day, Tanner called me crying to God as he didn't know what to do. The government official told him he needed $75,000 for the permits, accident, and negligence, and another $50,000 for the medical care of his coworker who by now is needing emergency surgery. Tanner begged me for a loan of $125,000 plus any other fees that might come up. He said he wants to fly home after all this and asked me for $150,000 in total to cover everything. I told him that I don't have that kind of money. He told me that I should pray to God to bless me with money to give to him. I told him there'd be no way to get that kind of money, and he pressured me to look into a home equity loan or some type of credit advance from my bank. I told him that I can ask my church if we can do a fundraiser, but $125,000? That's nearly impossible. Tanner told me that as a Christian, I should be able to go to great lengths to help a fellow Christian. I told him I'm helping with the prayer and that's the best I can do. I did speak to my pastor about a fundraiser, but he was a little skeptical about the situation. I told Tanner I had spoken to my pastor, and Tanner became angry, telling me that it's shameful for me to ask because this is our personal business and our relationship, and I shouldn't air our dirty laundry to the congregation. I told him that I wanted to try and get a fundraiser going, and he became more angry, telling me to just call my bank and get a loan, or sell my house, and move into a small apartment and use that money to give to him. I was a little shocked by his behavior. I told Tanner, we're not married. We're not even in an in-person relationship. I will not be treated in such a way even if we were together. Tanner told me that I don't seem like a genuine Christian, and he said if I can't get the money, then stop wasting his time, and he'll just end up in prison because of my neglect. I asked Tanner for the name of his company as I wanted to call his boss and speak to him. Surprisingly, Tanner gave me his boss's phone number and he said his boss's name was Mr. Harold. I called the number, which was a Texas area code, and no one would answer, and it went to voicemail. I left a message and received a text message a short while later asking who this was. I told him to call me. It's regarding Tanner's situation with work. The person told me to text him only and asked that I am paying the associated fees with Tanner's work mistake or not. I again asked this person to call me and he refused to do so, so I told him in text that I had the $125,000. Amazingly, this person called. It sounded like Tanner, but they were speaking very softly. I asked him to speak up louder and he hung up. I suspected this was Tanner trying to disguise his voice by speaking quietly. I told Tanner I called his boss and he must have a twin. He didn't get the joke, and a few minutes later, the Texas number rang me. This time it was a very deep voiced man who had the same accent as Tanner. I asked where his boss is from, and he told me he's from South Africa but living in Texas and head of the company. He explained the situation and told me to put 100,000 of his own money into Tanner's mistake, and now I only need to come up with 25,000 to save Tanner from imminent doom. I told this guy I don't have $25,000, and he started yelling that I was a poor woman and I should find a way, sell my car, sell my house, sell my clothing, and as a Christian, I need to do this and stop living in lust and sin. If this wasn't so shocking, it would be hilarious. I told him that he and Tanner clearly are not Christians and we are through and to lose my number. I blocked Tanner and his so called boss, and it wasn't a few hours later I started to receive threats via WhatsApp from numbers I did not know. Messages telling me I was a sinner, I should repent, and send $25,000. This was something out of a nightmare, and I continued to block, and I ended up being flooded with calls and texts at all hours of the day and night. I turned my phone off. I discussed the situation with my pastor, and he told me he didn't want to do a fundraiser as it sounded like some sort of scam, but he didn't have the heart to make such an accusation without proof. Now, hearing what I'm going through, he was sure it was a scam set up by some kind of online scammers. I felt so sick over this entire situation, and I've prayed about it, and I've come to accept that I was scammed. I thankfully didn't fall for the big scam of 125,000. He was very angry and aggressive and continued to harass me online with phone calls. I allowed my faith to override the red flags and I allowed this scammer into my heart and home. Lesson learned. Thank you. And we'd like to thank this lady for sharing her story. Oftentimes, scammers now are coming across very aggressive and they're asking for ridiculous amounts of money. Years ago, we'd have scammers ask for $100 or $500. Now they're just blatantly asking for 100,000 or even a million. If you come across someone that is in this type of situation, look at the red flags and never, ever send gift cards or money to anyone you don't know in person. If you'd like to share your story, you can find us scammingscammers@gmail.com. Drop us your story as well as any screenshots to help us verify your story, and we will edit it into a video and narrate it. Give me a little bit of time as I'm backlogged right now with a bunch of stories, but I'm working as quickly as I can to get them out. Until next time, look for the red flags, and as always,